Probably a lot of us in the room still remember the show Dick Tracy and the Gadgets, and it was all about gadgets. Gadgets is where we live now, and they're mystifying. Their quantity, how quickly they change. The question, is it content or is it the device? We're going to get some people up, it's a great panel, to address the endless possibilities of gadgetry. The title of the session is Media on Tablets and Mobile Devices, and I'm going to ask back a guy who was up yesterday, the community manager for NARM's digitalmusic.org. Please welcome Antony Bruno.
Hey, can the rest of the panel come on the stage? How's everyone doing? We awake, post-lunch? I'm groggy because I got woken up by a fire alarm last night. Anyone else had that? Wasn't that fun? That was awesome. Big hand for the panel too. Don't just applaud me. Come on, these guys all get a little bit of love. So we're gonna sit down and we're just gonna have a conversation. No slides or anything like that. There he is. So we're here today to talk a little bit about, when you think of digital, actually, what really is going to be top of mind for not only the people on this panel, but really should be for everybody, which is the mobile and the emerging tablet space. We've heard a lot about, particularly in the post-iPad world, that things are becoming a post-PC world. You know, you're kind of getting away from the computer and the laptop, and all of this media is going to start being consumed more and more on mobile devices and tablets. And so that has a lot of device form factor issues, consequences and whatnot, as well as usability consequences, licensing consequences, things like that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit on the panel today. So what I want to do here is I'm going to have the panelists here introduce themselves. They're going to tell us who they are, what they do, what their company does, and what the last app was that they downloaded that is not their own. And I do mean not your own. Okay, somebody started me to my left.
Hello. Is this working? Yep. Okay, so my name's Thom Cummings. I lead the marketing team at SoundCloud. For those of you who don't know SoundCloud, we're the world's leading social sound platform and give content creators of any kind of sound, music, journalists, podcasters, the capability to distribute and promote their work on the internet. And the latest app that I downloaded, I think, was something called Pocket Wine, which is a directory of all the different types of wine that you can drink, which you can decide for yourself whether or not that says anything about me.
I'm Michael Schneider. I'm CEO of Mobile Roadie, and Mobile Roadie is a platform that lets non-technical people make a mobile app in about an hour. We just turned 3, so we're 3 years old. We power apps ranging from Madonna, Adele, the Beatles, Taylor Swift, to a whole bunch of stuff in sports, entertainment, the Canadian Music Week app. The most recent app I downloaded that's not one of ours is an app called Clear, and it's a really cool task checklist, if that's possible. But it is really cool. You should check it out.
I'm Stephen Henrik. I work at the Globe and Mail. And my role there is audience development and distribution, which means I look into new platforms. 3 years ago, that new platform was this thing called a smartphone, and 2 years ago was this thing called a tablet. And now I'm looking into anything from connected TV to digital screens. Prior to that, I was in the web space, working for Rogers Media, CTV, and a couple startups. Last app I downloaded was Voice Brief, which takes RSS feeds and converts them text into voice. And the second last app, because we're talking about music, was digitally imported for all of you electronic music fans.
Hi, I'm still Ted Cohen from the last panel. Last apps that I downloaded at South by Southwest was Highlight and Banjo. Both really good social apps. If you download Banjo or Highlight right now, you'll find there's 30 people sitting around you that you have something in common with. So it's a great socialization tool.
Hi everybody, I'm Daniel Odio. I'm the CEO of Socialize. We're here from San Francisco. Socialize is a drop-in social platform that makes an app social. We believe that your users are your best marketers, and social actions that they're taking inside of your app are very good ways to drive downloads of your app. So we help make all of that happen. And by the way, I am watching Twitter, so if you have a question during this panel, my Twitter handle is Drodio, which is right up there, DRODIO. I'll try to work any comments into whatever I say today, so feel free to tweet out and just mention Roadie. The last app that I downloaded actually was this morning, the Team Coco app. It's the Conan O'Brien app, and they do a very interesting audio sync, which we'll talk more about during the panel here, but they're bringing the show to the tablet in some new and interesting ways.
Okay.
And again, I'm still Spinal Tap.
You're still Spinal. And my name, of course, Antony Bruno. I kind of have two hats, as it were. I'm here formally as the community manager for digitalmusic.org. Digitalmusic.org is a trade association for, as you might guess, the digital music industry, and I'm helping develop that division of the larger association, which is called NARM. I'm also an independent consultant, which brings me to the last app that I downloaded, which was Square, the mobile payment app, because it makes it easier for clients who neglect to pay you to do so when you confront them with a credit card reader. So I'll be using that a little bit more often, I think, these days. So great. Well, listen, thanks everyone for being here. I know this is a really interesting area. I guess what I wanted to start with is just sort of an open-ended question to the panel, which is, and just before I get to that, just so you all know, we're going to start talking a little about mobile first, and we're kind of expand a little bit more to the tablet space just by going chronologically with what's been available and how the addition of the tablet's been adding to the way we all can conceptualize these things in apps and media and things like that. But just kind of starting with, when it comes to how you guys consider this stuff, where does the mobile/tablet space fit into sort of the broader digital platform framework in your minds? I mean, is mobile and tablets sort of an offshoot of a web-based experience, or is mobile and tablet first and the web now sort of an adjunct to that? Basically, how do you guys incorporate these different platforms now in the grand scheme of what we had traditionally just considered to be a web or PC-based type thing?
Well, the way I summarize mobile, and specifically smartphones, is, and I read this not too long ago, is smartphones are the remote control of your life, whether you like it or don't like it. And I know there's a lot of talk about first screen, second screen, third screen, fourth screen. You can go on. I just call it a companion screen because mobile, smartphones specifically, it's always with you.
We think that the majority of the world is actually doing it backwards, meaning they are starting with a website and then going to mobile and TV maybe and whatever else may make sense. By the end of likely this year, there'll be more traffic from smartphones and mobile phones to most websites than there will be from desktop and laptop computers, especially when you take into account the iPad. And so it doesn't make sense anymore to start with a website and then figure out what else makes sense, and maybe you'll do an app or a mobile-friendly website or other things. It actually makes more sense to start with mobile, and then, if applicable, go elsewhere. And that's a trend we see, and it just makes more sense.
Building off of what Michael just said, specifically for tablets, tablets are very interesting because users tend to consume differently on tablets than they do on desktop web. And what we see is that tablets are actually taking the place of the desktop computer. And so we're starting to see a world where the computer is not the hub as it's been in the past, but everything is happening on the cloud and you're consuming through tablets. And to give you some stats, e-commerce conversion rates on desktop web tend to be about 3%, but on tablets they're 4 to 5%. And specifically, orders on tablets are 10 to 20% bigger than they are on desktop web, which is pretty amazing. So I'd really encourage, if you're thinking about mobile and a strategy, to think about not desktop as much as different ways that content is being consumed, and tablets are absolutely at the top of that list.
Yeah, I mean, the way we think about it at SoundCloud is we're a company that started off web first, and we've been adding mobile products to our portfolio over the last few years. And it's really grown to a place where we now think of each of those platforms as equal. So whilst there's definitely a trend towards a lot of people thinking mobile first, we definitely believe that the web is going to be an important platform for the next 5 years or so. And it's really thinking about how we can design a different experience for each platform that works best for the user on that area.
I totally agree. I mean, you have to scale the experience to the canvas, and the smartphone canvas is too small to try and crowd a bunch of things into. Michael, you've got something interesting. I don't know if you're showing it, but your new layout for tablet. Who cares?
We're
anyway,
getting to that, man.
If you
Don't
want to
blow
see
my
something,
plan
if you want
here.
to see something that basically is the best example I've seen of smartphone versus tablet is SoundHound. SoundHound has done a great job of creating an experience on the tablet that is a much richer experience than you could possibly get out of an iPhone or an Android device.
One more stat that really struck me was, to Daniel's point, eBay. And I think these are year-old stats, but they still prove the point. The average price that someone would spend on eBay was $45 in a given transaction on their website, and it was $65 in their tablet app. And that's the same products and it's the same auctions. But having that immersive experience, that big screen, really makes a difference in terms of what people are willing to spend on their tablet.
So I'm trying to take the mindset here as the actual content provider for a little bit, and I'm trying to understand that. All right, I've got my content that I want to put out there, and I've got 3 different major devices on which to do so. Right? I've got a PC, web-based experience, a tablet experience, mobile experience. Part of it is, okay, do I do one first and then expand to the others, or do I do all 3 at the same time? You can understand how this can be a really daunting concept for someone to, before it was just like, okay, I just got my head wrapped around my web strategy. Now I got to get my head wrapped around these other things. And the way that the way that people use each of these 3 different devices, as it were, are all very, very different. So how do you recommend, from a content provider perspective, do they kind of grok that whole thing, basically, to use a nerd term? Like, how would you suggest that they approach developing to this, space?
Well, the first thing you need to know is what type of device is consumed at what time in the day. So smartphones are generally consumed throughout the full day. There are obviously some peaks, but the desktop is consumed primarily during the day, people at school, at work. And tablets, which is an interesting area, is primarily consumed in the evening. So it's not only important to know your audience segments, but audience segmentation by platform, by time of day. It gets complicated, but if you really want to master the space, you need to know each of those areas.
One thing that I'd say to that is know your particular audience. Like, have you looked at your logs to see what percentage of your usage is coming from a mobile device where they're just trying to look at your website? Is your website optimized for mobile? It might be that you're getting 25% or more of your traffic from a mobile device, and you don't even have the very basic, highest ROI, lowest cost is to make a mobile version of your website. And if you have a lot of traffic coming from mobile devices, you'll get a very high ROI from that. So it all has to come from goals and budget. It's very easy to throw money away in mobile because it can be so expensive to do some sexy and interesting things. But you can get a lot of ROI just by looking at the patterns of your specific audience today and seeing how they're consuming content.
I think this problem has, to a large degree, been solved, meaning there are tools for developers to do things a lot quickly and cheaply. There are tools for lay people to do mobile experiences and desktop experiences a lot cheaply and quickly compared to a few years ago. You do need to do all of them, but it's not 3 times or 5 times the amount of work.
Okay, so tactically, the tools are there to do so. Strategically, it still takes a little bit of figuring it out, though. But tactically, it's cheaper and easier to develop to all 3 platforms than it was before, is what you're trying to say, just to clarify. Okay. And so that's sort of the question I had related to me creating my own experience as a content provider. The other thing that I find interesting is that there's also plenty of other apps and services out there across all 3 different areas, mobile, tablets, and web. There are other services that I might avail myself of, basically, other apps that are constantly coming out that I can maybe get my content integrated into, basically. That seems to be an incredibly fragmented space. There always seems to be a new app that's popular, comes out, everyone downloads it, everyone uses it, then the next thing comes out and everyone moves over to that next app. And how do I keep up with that? Or should I keep up with that?
Shouldn't keep up with it. It's what resonates for you. I mean, we again, talking about South by Southwest, which was this conference in Austin last week, every year there's the darling of the conference. What's the hottest app that everybody's downloading? Last year was a thing called Hashable, which turned out to be very unusable. It was really, initially it looked like a great idea. Instead of me giving you a business card, we create this hash thing that we pass around. It turned out nobody was really doing it. So, I mean, if it resonates for you, there's tried and true things that I still use, every day, whether it's Foursquare, really pedantic, basic apps. Some of the bells and whistles stuff that's coming out, you play with it. If it works, you use it. If it doesn't, you move on.
I don't think you need to be a technologist and keep up with every single trend because most of them aren't relevant to your business. You mentioned Highlight from South by Southwest. I'm just curious, how many people have heard of Highlight or used Highlight in the audience? Okay, so a few people.
How many of you started using it and then stopped using it?
That would be me.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to ask you guys what the last app you deleted was, but we'll save that for later.
The point is, there's a ton of noise out there, and I think most of it is not relevant, and you shouldn't feel the pressure to keep up with every single. The tech industry is very fickle, and attention is very fickle, and you shouldn't feel the pressure to keep up with every single trend as it's happening. As things stand the test of time, maybe they become more interesting for you.
This Highlight will tell you that you and another person both read Fahrenheit 451 in high school. You've got a lot in common.
I tried it, I deleted it, it was fine. I'm interested in SoundCloud's perspective on this because you're one of those services that can basically be integrated into almost anything, really, depending on what the other app's process was. Do you approach that? Do you look at, okay, what are the different services, what are the different apps that we want to be involved in, or do you take it more sit back and allow your API to do the work? Like, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, on the whole, we're fairly agnostic towards what platforms we want to support. The web is a wide and open space, and there's people developing really innovative things on a bunch of different platforms. Probably the criteria we're looking at when we decide where to put our focus from a platform development point of view is, are people doing something really interesting and new and innovative with their service, or are they just repeating something that we've seen 100 times before? And I think there's so many ways for people to consume content on the web. What we're focusing on is, regardless of platform, how can people create interesting creation experiences? How can people create something that allows people to engage and interact on content rather than just purely consume it? And mobile is definitely an interesting place that allows people to do that because it is a far more interactive platform by its very nature.
So I want to open up more broadly to the whole API question, and this is what I find really interesting. In the early days with mobile, everyone kind of came up with their own flavor of app or service, and that's what you used. And now you're seeing a lot of these, SoundCloud particularly an example, opening up its API so that when you could create apps that are a jumble of 4 or 5 different features from these different providers that are already out there. Explain the importance of that and how that goes into both from a media and content provider's perspective, as well as from the app developer perspective, how that sort of broad, openly available API environment is basically leading the new innovation of today's apps, regardless of platform.
Just to do some quick vocab, because we live this every day, and again, I try to be very pragmatic on panels. If you think of an API as a recipe, so you want to bake a cake, an API is a recipe. If you do certain things, you get a certain result. It's a way to communicate with a data set. An SDK is like the Betty Crocker pre-made cake mix. So an SDK can utilize an API, but it's already, some of the work is done for you. So what we've done with Socialize is we've created a social platform, and it is an API, but we've created open source SDKs, so if you're really lazy as a developer or busy, you can drop in these SDKs and it makes your app social. And exactly to your point, this idea of really being able to quickly and easily create functionality that would otherwise take you a lot of work to make is what makes APIs and SDKs so amazing. Like literally in 5 minutes, you can drop Socialize into your app and make it social, and that brings you a lot of benefits. So things like APIs and SDKs are wonderful ways, if you're making an app, to offload a lot of the heavy lifting and work and get a world-class, best-in-class service inside of your app.
And I would just say, like, for us, APIs are really, really important. It allows us to go to produce beyond new it's all about distribution. APIs help that. Also helps us to go on for multi-platform access, which is just a way of connecting web to tablet, to smartphone, to anything else.
How do you evaluate? I have a quick question. So you must look at a lot of them that's out there that you want to integrate into your own services. How do you evaluate which ones that you want to use versus which ones maybe aren't worth adopting?
Basically, it comes back to what I said earlier, is we do a lot of audience research, segmentation, which then leads to a list of features. And the feature priority, no matter what you're doing in digital, is really key. feature priority determines our, what we prioritize in terms of API, because then it's all about distribution.
Well, once you determine which feature that you want to implement, how do you determine from whose API do you use that? You see what I'm saying? There could be like 3 different geolocation APIs that you have to choose from. How do you determine which one it is? Is it going to be with the service that has the most traction already with users? Is it more of a technology integration ease issue? Like, how do you decide once you decide the feature, how do you decide which API is going to deliver that feature?
We basically just, whatever, usually, because we're in the news business, whatever is the fastest to implement, just because there's a lot of competition in the news space. So speed to market is very, very important, has always been important for us.
I think the bigger point, though, is that standards have emerged, which is nice. Like, Soundcloud has become the standard for audio, or YouTube for video, and so any service that's worth anything today is going to have these sort of standard integrations where you don't even need to know the word API, but you can pull in content from services that are just commonplace, and it saves you a ton of time.
Okay. So let me sort of take the next step now and talk more specifically about the tablets. What I'd like to hear all of you chime in on here momentarily is this: what, in your mind, is the primary important point of differentiation between the tablet and the smartphone? I mean, they're both connected. Yeah, one's got a bigger screen. Other than the bigger screen, though, how do I really approach these as 2 separate devices as opposed to one being a subset of the other?
But the other than the bigger screen is the differentiating thing. Having that canvas to work with, having room for a video player on, I use SoundHound again as an example, because I really like the app and I like what they did between the 2 formats. Just use the canvas to the best capability. Other than that, and it's also processing power, and it's also, I mean, there's a lot of things happening in the background, but it is what's happening. There's some people doing some interesting stuff using the tablet correctly. Kindle's doing some good stuff. Some of the stuff that they've modified for the Kindle Fire is really a good experience using that, again, that canvas to its best, possibility.
I think the overall trend is, I think we used to, let's say even before smartphones, someone would text us a message, or we'd want to remind ourselves to do something, but we'd wait till we got home or at a computer to actually do it. Now we can do almost anything from a smartphone, but if I'm going to actually get into something, read an article, I'm going to use my tablet. It's just a better experience. So it's just a bigger screen, but that just is a big just. Our very first music iPad app comes out on Monday, and we've completely redesigned it, and having that extra screen real estate means instead of tapping 3 or 4 times to get different information, it's all in one place. It's an incredibly immersive experience, and we're hoping to see some eBay-style stats and jump from that.
There's also two factors that I think you should consider. I already talked about use by time of day, so that's important to consider. You should also consider penetration rates. In Canada, the tablet market has jumped from 3% to 10% of Canadians 18 plus in Canada. Smartphone market has jumped, and in the US it's higher. It actually doubled in the US from December to January, just primarily because of the release of the Kindle Fire. Smartphones in Canada, penetration rate has jumped from 23% to 34% January to January. So you need to consider the penetration rate. You also need to consider in the home how people are using it. The tablet's primary use is in the living room, whereas a smartphone is used throughout, but in the living room is where the tablet owns the space versus an e-reader versus a smartphone.
I'm glad you brought that up. So if no one had, I was going to bring that up, so we'll get back to that in a second.
I would definitely say that when you think about a smartphone, this is more of a way to connect digitally with the world around you. So a great example is geofencing. By the way, who's heard of geofencing? I'd be really curious to see if this is a generally... Okay, so a bunch of you. There's a great app called Scout Mob, which is a daily deals app, but you have to be at the physical location to get the deal. So if you're not in the restaurant, you can't claim the deal. And it's things like that the smartphone is almost like interest DNA digitally, where my phone isn't just a phone, it's who I am represented digitally. And wherever I'm going or whatever I'm doing on the phone, that phone can connect with the digital world, whereas the tablet is more about consumption. And that's why I keep saying it's getting rid of the computer more than it's encroaching on the smartphone. The tablet is the new hub, the new computer.
I'm not Tom, you haven't chimed in on this one. I'm not letting you off the hook. But.
Yeah, no, on the question of if it's a consumption medium, I think actually the iPad and tablets in general are a really great medium for creation. Because of the extra real estate that you have and the more immersive experience you can build, you can recreate things that you just simply cannot do on the small screen real estate that you have on a mobile device. So you get some really fantastic apps that allow you to play with content, to manipulate content, and to create something new in a flash. And you know, we talk about step changes in technology that have made it easier for people to create content, and first was the PC, and then you had things like GarageBand, and nowadays you have the tablet, and the tablet allows you to create something in a minute and make it valuable and make it something you can share with the rest of the world.
Okay, so let me see if I could summarize this. Would it be fair to say that one clear difference between the two devices would be that a smartphone would maybe be more applicable to, say, a geolocation type of application, where am I, who's around me, what can I do while I'm there, whereas a tablet might be more attuned to a more interactive, in-depth content creation type of experience. I mean, in broad brushes, would that be a fair assessment of what I just heard?
I think it is. There's also a huge B2B play for tablets, which isn't really appropriate for here, but the idea of commoditized hardware, where as an enterprise, you know, UPS had to use these symbol devices that were very expensive. Today, if I want to do something and have my employees use tablets, I have a $500 piece of hardware that I can ruggedize and have them use. So commoditized hardware in the enterprise is a really huge opportunity as well.
I'm not sure I understood.
So before, if I'm UPS and I want my employees to be able to scan packages, I had to procure Symbol devices, which was the brand, of very expensive hardware. Today, as an enterprise, I'm able to procure $500 commoditized hardware tablets and allow my employees to be much more efficient and effective in the field with this cheap hardware. And this idea of cheap hardware is huge for the enterprise.
Okay. But going back to those differences that we were talking about in terms of, you know, smartphone more geolocation, tablet more interactive content creation, are there any other little use cases like that that we can point to as being sharp differences between the two?
I find the tablet to be more of a commerce device in terms of when I'm shopping, not picking up on a Groupon momentary thing, but if I'm on Amazon. I mean, since I bought the Kindle, I have tripled or quadrupled what I spend on Amazon, usually between 11 o'clock at night and 2 in the morning. I'm sitting with the Kindle in bed. Yeah, I'll take one of those. And when you add free shipping, no tax, and instant one-click shopping, things arrive the next day that I don't remember ordering.
So basically,
are you working
watching
for Amazon, Ted?
What?
Are you working for Amazon?
No, Amazon is no.
He's not a client.
Well, he brings up the point about we have an ecosystem. So, and obviously Apple owns the market in smartphones. Android owns the market. Apple in tablets and Android in the smartphones. Ecosystem is very important because, like you said, you've got an Amazon tablet, so you're there.
No, I'll give you, even just for a moment, I'll give you an example. I looked at a Schwinn Aero bike. It's this thing that's like a big fan pedal. They keep giving me a lower price every day. Every time I pick my Kindle up, the price has gone down like $25. I'm probably going to click before I leave here. It'll be there when I get home. I mean, it is not only a media consumption device. It started out as a book that also does other things. It's much more than that now, and it's getting more like that every day. I'm sorry, so you were saying, I didn't mean to...
So, Michael, I want to talk to you a little bit more about you're basically introducing, you know, basically until now, when I had mobile Roadie, you know, artist apps, they were on the phone. Now that I'm getting those on the tablet, the iPad as well. Just break out a little bit as you were going through the process of creating this. I mean, were there things that you were looking at as to how are you going to recreate those apps, those smartphone apps, onto the iPad? Is it an extension of the smartphone app? Did you have to reinvent what that app was going to look like and what it was going to do? Are there things on the iPad version that you can't do on the smartphone and vice versa? And if so, why? I mean, I want to get an understanding of how you kind of wrap your head around this.
We truly started from scratch. From a content perspective, so from our customer's perspective, they're not having to reinvent the wheel to have an iPad app. They need to do some graphics and stuff. But when we were creating the products, what we think is the wrong way is let's just scale everything up and center things and make it look decent. What we actually did was we looked at all this new screen real estate, got really excited, and went back to the drawing board and spent quite a number of months re-architecting the product. There's nothing we can't do on an iPad that we could do on a smartphone, but it just presented this enormous opportunity for it to look and feel amazing compared to the smartphone app.
And in terms of like features, differences in features, what you can do on one versus what you can't do on the other.
Well, we make a lot more use, for example, of parallax scrolling, which is a fancy term for having this sort of really interesting 3D feel to it as you're scrolling through the application. You can do that on the iPhone. The processor isn't quite as fast, and the screen's just a lot smaller, so it doesn't look quite as cool. But yeah.
Is it mostly a UI thing?
It's mostly a UI thing, just like we're saying, it's the bigger screen size.
User interface thing? I'm not sure how.
It's mostly a graphics thing.
Okay, all right. Well, so, what about Stephen? Do you have any thoughts on that as well? Again, as a sort of as the content creator yourself, are you looking at two completely different apps that do a lot of the same things, some of the different things, but with a mind towards retaining some semblance of flow between them?
Well, yes, definitely in some categories we're big on the investing category. So if you have a portfolio, you know, if you check it on your tab, I mean, it's kind of like what Netflix is, right? I mean, you move from platform to platform. You know, there needs to be a connection. But two of our challenges, one in the smartphone space is what we talked about, location. So how does a company like us, a national sort of media company, not well known for going local, how do we get there? And in the tablet space, tablets are consumed, you know, heaviest consumption is at night in the living room. Well, we don't play in that space generally. We play in a daytime space. But in both cases, that gives us an opportunity, and anyone else, you know, smartphones and tablets can give you an opportunity to get into new audiences and new incremental revenue.
I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to start taking your questions from the audience. We have a couple of microphones in the aisles here, which I'm going to frankly need you to use so we can, you know, hear what it is you're asking, and also know that you have a question, because it's very, very difficult for us to see hands raised up here, basically. So I'm gonna bring up one more topic, and then hopefully I'll look out here and see a number of you lined up in front of the microphone to ask some really insightful, hard-hitting questions. So last for you guys. I have both a smartphone and an iPad, right? I use them both. What I found is that the iPad, because it's mostly to I forgot who made the point, that it was a device that I basically keep in my living room, right? And so what about using that as sort of whether it's a remote control or some kind of a interface to the other things that are also, you know, in your living room, whether it's, you know, my Sonos, for instance, that's the main thing I use it for, that and keeping my 3-year-old busy. But, you know, other things like that, where if I'm listening to music on my regular stereo, is there a way of IDing the songs and then getting more lean in onto what I'm listening to? Just that sort of concept of integrating the tablet with the other devices, whether it's the stereo or the TV or the game center or whatever it might be.
Well, and the same thing that Daniel said about the commoditization of hardware. I mean, there were companies like AMX and Crestron that were making a fortune with home automation. With, like, you would see Crestron in the boardroom at your company with a touchscreen control panel that they would charge $5,000 for, that you can now do with a, you know, $300 tablet. So that whole thing of there's a company called Control 4 that allows you to automate your stereo, your video, your air conditioning, the drapes, lock the doors, all from an iPad or from an Android tablet. And that stuff is just becoming everything that you talked about that was Star Wars a few years ago. You can get an app from X10. I don't know if anybody's ever spent time on the X10 site. It's all these little control modules you can put around the house, and you can control all of that from a tablet. It's fairly amazing.
To that B2B point, I was recently flying on American Airlines, and they have those obviously built-in screens that are designed in 1995 that you can play videos, sometimes on demand, sometimes you need to wait until the next iteration of that video starts. I mean, it's pretty old school. And they were passing out Samsung tablets with pre-built movies, which I guarantee you are probably a 20th of the cost of those screens and a hell of a lot more powerful. And I hope personally that airlines just have iPads at every seat. It would save them a lot of money and be a lot more versatile. One interesting trend here is that software has been eating hardware, and what I mean by that is things that used to require hardware you can now do with software, like the X10 modules. Another easy example is keyboards. You used to have a physical keyboard, now you use a software keyboard, and when you use a soft keyboard, you can iterate on that much more quickly. So this kind of trend of software eating hardware is a very interesting one. Twilio is another great example. It's an API. You used to need to have very expensive telco switching boxes, things that you can do with a Twilio API today.
Yeah, and the fact that we've been talking about platforms and APIs a lot, the fact that now that is a standard across a bunch of different services, you can now go from device to device to device and still have a consistent experience that's personalized to you, no matter where you're picking it up from, and I think that's really key as well.
I'm a huge fan of API mashups. You know, there's no reason that your house can't have an API, and I think it will.
All right, I don't see anyone standing in front of the microphones. Come on, you have no questions? You guys are all mobile and tablet experts. Here we go, in the back there, sir.
Hello.
Who are you, and what do you want to know?
My name is Barry Cole from New York. I am primarily in music, but I have a digital ebook publishing company which has come about with the new wave of all the possibilities. So, with the esteemed panel up there, what I'd really like to know is if I wanted to build an app and I wanted to incorporate SoundCloud, I wanted to incorporate Socialize within that app, what is the structure of that logistically and business-wise?
Interesting. Okay, so is Spotify out here? I'm sorry that I don't know that.
In Canada?
In Canada? No? Okay, well, Spotify last November in the U.S. Launched a bunch of apps. Rolling Stone, Billboard, Mood Agent, Spin, I think. I don't know.
Launched 12 more today, a bunch.
There's a bunch.
Labels are doing it.
And they're basically APIs, but what's interesting about it is their business rules, which seem to make no sense at all, is you can plug your API into Spotify and you can improve the Spotify experience for Spotify, but you're not allowed to monetize the app that you've plugged in. So you can't, if you're using the app to control the Spotify experience, you can't have any in the stream advertising, you can't do anything to basically make money from helping them grow their business.
And that's Spotify's. I think, but that's Spotify does that, Facebook to a certain degree does that. But I think there's a lot.
Yeah, to answer your question, there's a number of systems you can use, such as ours and many others, to do that. SoundCloud is built in, social tools are built in. Any app platform that is worth anything is going to have those things already built into it. And as far as the business arrangement, they range from free to maybe a few grand a year.
Okay, so it's more a subscription than a percentage kind of royalty thing.
Every company has a different business model. One of the benefits of app platforms being software as a service is we as technologists are chasing technology, and mobile technology is moving at an incredibly fast pace with new devices and operating systems coming out all the time. And versus you having to worry about it and keep your app up to date from a functionality and feature point of view, you're renting the software from us, we're taking care of that so you can focus on the content. That's the benefit of the software as a service relationship.
What Michael's saying is absolutely the right way to think about it, which is what's core to you? Is building your own app with your own dev team or an outsourced dev team, is that core to your business, or are you better off using a framework? For example, Appcelerator has built Socialize in, so if you get an app built through Appcelerator or AppMaker or any of the other ones, you can use things like Socialize. Or you can decide to do it yourself. That's going to have a much higher upfront cost. But if it's core to your business, you may want to have that control. Everything has a cost, right? So you have to decide what cost you want to incur when. Oh, and by the way, D. Lehman on Twitter was asking what was the name of the geofencing deals app that I mentioned. It's called Scout Mob. I don't know if it's up here in Canada, but I'm in a bit of a bubble in San Francisco. It's definitely...
Don't hide behind the Twitter. Microphones, come on.
Thanks.
Up, get up here. We want to have some more questions. And also, just to answer that question, there's a lot of other different models, like Echo Nest, for instance. Their whole thing is licensing the API, and as long as what you're using it for is a non-commercial use, it's free. Once you start monetizing it, there's a cost. That's basically it. Anyone else have any questions there? I could jump out there and put a microphone in your face if you like, and I will.
Do it.
I always want to come in and have a big idea. So my big idea to those of you in the music industry, always looking for new sources of revenue, there's tons of distribution channels in music. So I'd say look at a brand new distribution channel and get in the content creation business. Brands are moving into content creation. I just read stories are becoming a new ad format. Get into content creation, get in there with a freemium model, and charge subscriptions for it. It's a brand new space. You have fans, and you have some fans that really, really like use artists and go into content creation.
I just want to say that along that line, I think what a lot of these technologies have done is democratize the creation of apps and mobile experiences to the point where a few years ago, unless you were Lady Gaga and had potentially a massive budget to create something really amazing, you couldn't compete. And today, you can compete for pennies on the dollar compared to that. And frankly, you're probably using the same technology she is. So it's a very exciting time if you have content and you want to get it out there to have just an amazing experience built around that content at a price you can afford.
One way to do that very pragmatically again is to just start capturing your content in new ways. So, Red Bull is an incredible example of this. Red Bull has an arm called Red Bull Media House where they capture all of the events that they're sponsoring, and they are repurposing that content in a lot of ways. A lot of it's through mobile. So, if you're a band and obviously your music is being captured, but have somebody videotaping your concerts and find ways to repurpose that content. Capturing is the first step. Start thinking about lots of easy, quick, cheap ways to start capturing content. I'm capturing the content of this panel. I have a camera where I repurpose this and I put it on my blog so others can see it. I mean, start capturing your content.
Am I going to get a release form for this? Sorry. Question out here, please.
Just wondering about what the big trending is for content engagement and interactivity. What's really working right now? I mean, I know reward systems, that sort of thing, but what's really capturing?
What's the hot thing right now?
We had one example where we have a gamification layer, so we rank users in each one of our apps, and our customers can see who's their biggest power user compared to the guy that's opened it once. And what's really working, one of the things that's really working is rewarding people based on their activity, especially when you take into account location. So a cool example of that was last summer, Linkin Park went on a tour and was actually at each tour stop upgrading fans' seats. I think they did 4 or 5 per show based on who was number 1 in their app and if they were actually at the show. And there's 1,000 other examples that knowing where someone is and knowing their activity, you could do really interesting things like that.
I would also say gamification is huge. It's a great way to establish a real relationship with your users. That's something with Socialize. If you drop it in, you can start learning who your users are. It's very hard in mobile to know who your users are. There's a black box. You might know that you had 100,000 impressions, but from who? So by letting those users authenticate and become known to you, you can start treating your users differently in the app and doing things like giving tickets away to the most active users, things like that. Gamification is a huge deal.
That's actually a really interesting part, and it's something that I've looked at from just the music industry standpoint, because traditionally the music industry, the labels specifically, the fan, the person who listened to the music, wasn't their customer. Their customer were the retailers who sold the music, and now we could talk about this all day, I know.
Yeah,
but
gamification was getting paid.
Yeah, exactly. Or charts. Let's not get there. But the point is that now it's not just the music industry, but many, many other industries who are now have to start taking into account the actual thoughts, usage, data, metrics of the actual end user into account for the first time ever, because they're now able to get directly to them through their own platforms, and that is something that people are still getting their heads wrapped around.
That's a world that's
many,
just
many
opening
ways.
up.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So maybe my question, I don't see anyone else asking a question there, is that we've been talking a lot about sort of the front end of these things to a certain degree in terms of what it looks like to the end user. We've talked a little bit about the building layer of these things in terms of how we add these features to the apps and whatnot. What about that sort of very back layer, which is the measurement? How it's being used, how that data is being captured, and how that data is being analyzed. Can you talk a little bit about that? You alluded to it as to like what time of day are they using and whatnot there, but let's get a little bit beyond that and really look at how that influences not only the product, but just sort of the space overall.
It's really hard in mobile because there's no third-party data in mobile apps. There are no cookies like there is on the web, so it's very hard to know who your users are, and that's a problem that we're trying to solve, and many others are as well. So just remember, all your users are not created equal, and your users are your best marketers. So finding ways to identify them and treat them differently depending on how passionate they are in your app is a really huge deal.
Again, I think location is one of the most interesting things. But from our perspective, the data is almost everything. I mean, knowing what people are listening to and watching and sharing. We track things like the viral loop. So if you share something to Facebook and someone clicks on something for that, where did that user go? Did they download the application? What did they do once they were in the application? But that data is key. And having an app there that's just a black box is a huge missed opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah, just to latch on to what Mark said about using Facebook and all the measurement pieces, if you're able to integrate the open graph into your application, you not only get a huge insight into who your customers are, who your users of the app are, and maybe their demographics and their behaviors, but you can also measure the viral spread of your content. And Facebook and plenty of other platforms give you an extra layer of data that you may not be able to get through your own.
I want to get this one last question out there.
That's a huge deal, by the way, the Open Graph, because today a view has no value to you, but if you can turn a view into a social action, so Daniel used the X app. Spotify and Netflix have done an amazing job of this. Daniel watched this movie. That turns into a social action that can then be monetized. It's a huge deal.
But which asks the question is, what's the value? I mean, this is a whole other panel. What's the value of a like?
We were talking about that in the last one.
Never mind.
We can get into that. So, yes, sir. Who are you, and what do you want to know?
Quick question. Joe Mello, Canada Post. This question is for Stephen. You're primarily a print shop, and using this media, what are you guys doing to generate new revenue streams?
Well, right now we're in the B2C space. We have always had a digital presence in the B2B space. So if we're looking at new opportunities, and those of you like in the music, entertainment, it's the same thing. Look into the B2B space. You're not dependent on subscriptions. You're not dependent on advertising, which fluctuates a lot. The B2B space, you can have your music, your videos anywhere. You can have it in taxis. You can have it in airports. So, and I think that when I started looking into emerging platforms of smartphones and tablets, now I'm looking into connected TV, digital signage. Why isn't your music? Why isn't your band? Why isn't your show in a bank? You know, I mean, just think of more. There's going to be more and more screens, and not just out there like on surfaces, on appliances, maybe one day in the air. But think of the B2B space where you can actually license your content to businesses, and partnerships are really, really key. How many of you in the music and entertainment space have talked to Microsoft about their Windows 8 launch, right? So talk to them, awesome. So we have as well. Talk to, the B2B space is very lucrative to generate a lot of money, and I just want to end by saying that I think business creativity, because there's so many revenue models and so many distribution channels, is now as important as artist creativity.
By the way, I know this question wasn't, I know this question wasn't directed to me, but I just want to throw my hat in with sponsors and brands and opportunities. I think that sponsors and brands and advertising agencies as a whole understand TV and radio and print and web banners, and that's sort of where the traditional knowledge ends, and there's this whole new ecosystem and opportunity inside mobile apps, using location, using push, using strategically placed branding, where we've had customers go and sell their apps to a brand and bring in meaningful dollars, and it's a whole new revenue channel that's opened up.
By the way, Microsoft is very motivated to catch up in the mobile space, and they're willing to put dollars behind that motivation. So if you have a brand, I would highly suggest talking to them. They have a beautiful platform, and they have the cash to make it ubiquitous. So have that conversation.
Anyone want the last word? My timer's clicking down to 1. Look at that. Doom. Done. Now that, I'm sorry, I'm patting myself on the back on that one. That was pretty awesome. Right at the 0 point, we're done. Big hand for the panel, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much.